Over the history of human settlement in Iceland, a combination of different factors has led to extensive environmental degradation of some areas. If we go back to our state and transitions model, we can say that increased human influence has created a new state, degraded areas, and it has also accelerated some transitions towards barren and desertified lands. This new state represents a transient state, leading nearly always from the well-vegetated states to barren areas. High numbers of sheep could cause the occurrence of erosion spots in the landscape that can then coalesce and form larger patches of bare ground. Once this eroded state is established, it is maintained by positive feedbacks. These bare ground areas are maintained by aeolian deposition that further suffocates vegetation, and processes like frost heaving prevent the establishment of vegetation in the exposed patches. Removing sheep alone may not be sufficient to revert the situation back to the original state. In response to the huge changes to the landscape and environmental degradation, nationwide efforts to halt soil erosion and forestry practices began in the early 1900s. A new law on soil conservation and revegetation was passed in 1907, leading to the foundation of two state organizations, the Soil Conservation Service of Iceland and the Forestry Service. These institutions are pioneering initiatives in the world. Afforestation and in some cases revegetation efforts created a new man-made state, plantations, that are dominated by introduced species. During the early 1900s, forestry efforts focused on preserving the remaining birch woodlands. The cover of birch woodlands during that period has been estimated to be around 1% of the country. Planting exotic conifers started in the late 1930s and was continued and even encouraged until the 1980s. Organized measures to halt soil erosion and reclaim eroded land through controlled revegetation of eroded areas started in the early 1900s. Commonly used methods involved sowing of agronomic grasses or native species. Other reclamation activities involved fencing off areas to exclude grazing and planting introduced species like the Alaska lupine, a species that is now considered invasive in Iceland. And all of these revegetation efforts paid off. We are starting to see recent greening trends in Iceland during the period between 1982 and 2010. These changes can be observed using satellite observations of an index of vegetation growth called NDVI. These trends are likely related to a combination of factors, including reductions in grazing, extensive revegetation and reforestation efforts, as well as climate warming and glacial retreat. However, environmental degradation is still a big concern in Iceland. Tundra rangelands recover very slowly. Some areas that have been protected from grazing have recovered to some extent, but active restoration is needed in many other places. Ideally, restoration programs must involve local stakeholders to ensure their long-term effectiveness. In Iceland, the main stakeholders are sheep farmers. Thus, restoration programs have to be designed, implemented, and maintained in partnership with farmers. One example of such an approach is the Farmers Heal the Land program. We have here Þórunn Pétursdóttir from the Soil Conservation Service of Iceland to talk a little more about this program.
The Farmer Heal the Land program was launched by the Soil Conservation Service in 1990. It's a state-funded, cost-shared program operated by the Soil Conservation Service on a nationwide basis. It builds on the voluntary participation of farmers that want to restore their own degraded rangelands, mainly the lowlands. The initial objectives of the program were to enhance trust and ease cooperation between the sheep farmers and relevant authorities, to encourage restoration of degraded lowland rangelands, to shorten the summer grazing period in the Highland Commons, to raise awareness among participants on the importance of grazing management, and to facilitate behavioral changes towards sustainable approaches to rangeland management. Currently, 30% of Icelandic farmers participate in this program. A recent evaluation of the program has shown that the Farmers Heal the Land program has facilitated restoration activities on extensive areas. The program has also increased awareness among farmers of the potential of rangeland restoration and enhanced trust between officials of the Soil Conservation Service and sheep farmers. Nevertheless, the program has not entirely fulfilled its initial objectives. For example, the evaluation indicated that the program has not facilitated other anticipated behavioral changes among its participants, such as sustainable land management. Furthermore, it seems that the direct incentives provided by the program are pushing participating farmers towards favoring agronomic instead of ecological approaches in their restoration activities. This shows us the importance of regular monitoring and evaluation to verify if outcomes are consistent with the initial targets and apply adaptive management approaches whenever it's needed to reset aims.
In summary then, there have been dramatic changes in Icelandic landscapes since human settlement. These changes have been exacerbated by climate, environmental and also economic factors. In response to concerns about land degradation issues, mitigation efforts have increased. Some of these efforts have incorporated participatory approaches. But for these programs to be effective, we need to regularly evaluate the outcomes and revisit periodically their initial objectives. But where do we go from here? What have we learned from past centuries of human influence in Iceland? In the next sections, we will discuss the current situation in Iceland, from the laws regulating sheep management today to current research efforts to monitor environmental impacts of sheep grazing.